Thank you for joining today's session. We will be getting started shortly. We do have a lot of folks signed up for today's session, and we want to give everyone a moment to log on and get connected so that we can dive into today's session. I do want to thank you all for joining us today. I am Jasmine Garrett, here with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. Today's session is an informational overview on the CAFE webinar. Quick housekeeping note, we do suspect that many questions will be answered in today's presentation. However, you are able to write in questions at any point during the presentation using Zoom's Q&A feature. It is one of our Zoom command options and will allow us to make sure that we are able to get back to you and let others see these questions and answers as well. Today's session is being recorded and will be posted on our NJEDA and YouTube pages. The slides and other resources will also be available in the next few days. Now, to get us started with the presentation, I will shift things over to NJEDA's Team Lead of Brownfields Incentives, Barbara Vadnais. Barbara?
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Really appreciate it. Like Jasmine said, I'm Barbara Vadnais, and I'm team lead with the CAFE program also. And EDA is really pleased to be rolling out this program, the Cultural Arts Facilities Expansion Program, and we have a lot of good information to present to you today. The presentation is going to be on how to complete the application for this first round of the CAFE program. I'll be going over each section of the application to give you an overview of the online document to help you prepare for completing the application form. The current application is still being tested from our end, so this is a draft version that I'm presenting today. This may not be the final version. And Elizabeth Limbrick is here. She's the director of CAFE, as you can see in the screen. She will be joining us also at the end of the webinar for the Q&A portion of the webinar. And Barbara Bickert is here also. We are asking that you limit your questions in the Q&A to just questions on the application, not necessarily on the program eligibility. We're just focusing on the application today. Next, please. So this is just one slide on the program overview. The CAFE provides tax credits for large-scale capital projects for arts and cultural venues throughout New Jersey. And most of this information, most up-to-date information is going to be on the program website at that website. The award coverage is from $5 million to $75 million, and it covers 100% of eligible project costs. Key eligibility requirements for this program include it has to be greater than or equal to $5 million cultural arts project. The cultural arts institution, which is the applicant, will have to have ownership or lease in the cultural arts facility. You need to operate it for 5 years after the construction of the project. It has to be open to the public, and construction must not have started before application submission, with some exceptions. And prevailing wage applies for construction and building services through the end of the eligibility period. Now, the good news you can see at the bottom of this slide is that applications will open on Monday, April 7th for this program at 10 a.m. And it's going to be a 60-day window. So we will be accepting applications until Friday, June 6th at 5 p.m. Now, I want to emphasize, don't apply for this unless you're really ready to apply. You need to be able to submit a full application that meets the program requirements. There will be other rounds for this program. This is only the first round on this program. To find out if you're eligible, the rules are available on the website and provide the eligibility and application requirements. In addition, we will be providing FAQs for clarifications, and application fees are not refundable. So if an application does not meet the program requirements, we will have to decline it, and the applicant will not get their money back. So just a warning, it's good to know about what's in the content of the application, but make sure you're really ready to apply. Next slide, please. This is the EDA Application Center sign-in page. I just have 6 slides on this just to give you a heads up of how to enter the portal. That's the website there in the first paragraph. Then you're going to have to register if you're new. If you haven't registered before, if you have registered before on other programs, then you can sign in, or if you've forgotten your password, then you can use that button and retrieve it. Next slide, please. Okay, these slides are just, let's go quickly through these. How to register your email address. Next slide, please. If your email is recognized by the application portal. Next slide, please. I just provided these to help you with the process. You don't want to leave this to the very end of the window. You want to, if you're interested in applying, go in and see if you can register for the program. Confirm your email address is the next one. And the last slide is the next slide, please. Okay, this is select your program. So this is where you want to be in login. And you want to pick the program that you're applying for, which is Cafe to the right, and you just want to click on that button. And then the next slide, please. So you're going to come, you know you've entered it, you're coming to the welcome page. This is the welcome page, which will provide an overview of the program, of the Cafe program. At the bottom is, you click on it to create a new application. And your application will automatically be saved every time you click the next button. So if you have to come back and you have an application created, you can, as long as you click the next button, which is kind of like the save button. The full application will take several hours to complete. Please read the prompts to questions carefully and provide professionally written responses that address all details requested in the questions in the suggested length of text. Applications submitted with placeholder documents and/or acknowledgements that the requested materials will be provided separately will not be deemed complete, and you're advised against submitting applications without all required documentation. Remember, what I said before is the application fee is not refundable. If you need to take a break, you can save your work by clicking the next button, as I mentioned above, as long as you've completed the required fields on the page. And if you've not completed the required fields, you'll probably be prompted at the top before you can go further. And if you've logged out of the application, you can return to the page by scrolling through each page that has been saved. You can also update pages that you're in and have already worked on. And you'll not be able to open the application or make any changes once you hit the submit button, which is at the very end of the process, at the very end of the application. But that's a good point to know. Once you've submitted the application, you can't make edits to the application. Next, please. Okay, this page is, if your primary language is not English, you can ask EDA for assistance here. Next, please. The primary point of contact. This is good to know. Okay, if the field has a red asterisk, that's a required field, just so you know that. On this page, we're going to collect the contact information for the primary point of contact for the application. And this is the primary point, the go-to person on the application. And we're going to ask for email address, and we're going to confirm email address on that too, because that's going to be used for correspondence on the application. Next, please. And we want to know if the primary point of contact is legally authorized to sign documents. If not, we will collect contact information for the authorized representative. So that's what this page is all about. If the primary point of contact is not the authorized representative, then you're going to be required to fill this page in. Next, please. Okay. And if the primary point of contact is not the CEO or equivalent, such as an executive director for a not-for-profit, then you'll be asked to fill in this page. So if the primary point of contact from the first page is not the same person, then you will be asked to fill in this page also. Next page, please. This is a consultant page. By consultant, we mean a consultant that has assisted with the application to provide this information. If there's any consultants that have assisted with this application and what their contact information is. It's not meant for like an environmental consultant or another type of consultant. It's strictly meant for a consultant that has helped with this application. Next, please. This is a field, this is a page on information on legal counsel if represented. And they can be copied on any updates to the primary point of contact. That's all this is asking for this. If you have legal counsel that you want to share or has been involved within, you can fill this page in. Media contact. That's just if there's a media contact that's not the primary point of contact, you could include that in. So we have that media contact for press releases or information. Accountant information, EDA may need to switch to the next slide, please. The EDA may need to communicate with an applicant's accountant. This section collects that contact information. And the accountant can also be copied on any updates that are going to be received by the primary point of contact. Next slide, please. Okay, here we get into the applicant organization. The applicant is also the cultural arts institution. And an applicant can be a nonprofit entity, a government entity, or a government economic or community development entity operating as a not-for-profit. All must have the primary mission of cultural arts and cultural education or artistic enrichment. In addition, for-profits are eligible for a cultural arts institution facility that's receiving a federal or state historic tax credit. We expect that most applicants will be nonprofits. However, there may be a few for-profit organizations that are applying, and only in that instance that for-profit can be eligible when they are receiving a historic tax credit from either the federal government or the state. So these are the requirements, fields for the applicant organization. You can read them yourself. One I want to pick up is the New Jersey Tax Clearance Certificate. There'll be instructions on how to obtain a tax clearance certificate for the applicant, and the different information requested on this entity type and the formation documents. Next, please. This is the applicant organization. More information on the applicant organization. Any funding that's previously been received by EDA, from EDA, we want to know about. Any issues on defaults with any other state agencies we'd like to know about. And if you're involved in a religious activity or religiously affiliated, if you answer yes, you're going to have to fill in a form that you have to download and sign. Next, please. And if the applicant has a headquarters, please provide that information there. Now, this is for only for the for-profit companies, and this probably will not apply to many applicants. The applicant must be receiving either a federal or state historic tax credit, and you select which one you're receiving and provide the supporting evidence. If you're receiving both, you just need to provide evidence either from the federal or the state. Next. Okay, the applicant is required to identify a lead development entity at time of application. If the applicant organization is also the lead development entity, this section will not appear in the application. The applicant is required to have one to identify it as part of the application. A lead development entity is responsible for overseeing the cultural arts project and should be able to demonstrate operational capability, expertise, and experience to complete the project. For instance, project design, project financing, permitting, and local approvals, construction oversight, and contracting and property management. So next slide. These slides cover the lead development entity. It's very similar to the applicant, the information again, the tax clearance certificate, that there'll be instructions in the application on how to retrieve that, entity type, and the tax information. Next slide, please. These are the same questions really asked through the applicant also. So if they've received previous funding from EDA, if they're in default of any state programs, and if they're a religious organization, they'll have to download a form to fill in. Next. And also if they have headquarters, list that, and a high level description for each member of the LDE. Next slide. Okay, the next slide is site control. At the time of the application, the applicant must provide the status of site control for right of access to the cultural arts institution to perform and complete the project. We want to make sure that at the time of application, there is interest in it and you will be able to complete the project. If an applicant has not secured a site agreement to the site, then a letter of intent is acceptable at time of application. However, the applicant will be required to provide a proof of actual site control by deed, lease, or some other method as a post-approval condition. So you will have to have a final document at that time. Next. Affiliates. This is similar to the IRS definition, and it's a very narrow definition. Please read this closely before you fill this out. Many of you will not have an affiliate. So if you do have an affiliate, if you fall into have an affiliate, then you will be adding affiliate information by clicking on that blue button. Next. And the following information, it looks very similar to the others, would be requested for an affiliate. Next. Okay, now we're on to co-applicant. If an applicant is a nonprofit, they cannot have a co-applicant. So if the applicant is a nonprofit, they cannot have a co-applicant. So they wouldn't have to fill in this section. The co-applicant would be a 501c3 and contribute capital, real property, or services to the project that will serve the anticipated visitors and a participation agreement with the applicant. And again, you hit the submit button and fill out the information for the co-applicant. Next. Okay, so this is information on the co-applicant, and these are the pop-up windows that you'll be asked to fill in on the co-applicant. Next. And this is additional information on the co-applicant. So you can see it's really important when you start this application process ahead of time, understand who your members are, who your applicant is, who your lead development entity is. If you have any co-applicants, you kind of have to understand that structure before you start in on the application. Next. Okay, next. This is, okay, this is subsidies, development subsidies of the co-applicant, what they're going to contribute. If they have any development subsidies, they would upload that information here. What the source is, anticipated or committed, the date, and the amount of the development subsidy. And this information will transfer over to the project economics section also of the application. We'll see that later. Next, please. Oh, intermission. Okay, just a second. We're just going to have a second intermission because we got through the common part, they call it the common part of the application, but like the information on your business and your the applicant and your partners. Now we're going to go into the details of your project, what your proposed project is, including scheduling and financing, and what your vision is for the project. So we're going to get started. It's just kind of a pause. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Okay, general project information. This section will review the general project information and scoring and project approach. So you want to give your project a name. That name is important because we're going to be referring to that often in the application. Scope of the project, including what the mission of the project is, the type of programming the project will have, community engagement strategies, educational opportunities, and how the cultural and arts will be promoted. A letter of intent for partnering with an organization who provides services and support to Work First New Jersey recipients. That just a letter of intent is required at the time of application to Work First New Jersey. Organizations that work with Work First New Jersey recipients. We have resource lists on the program website, and you can also work with others. And just a letter of intent is needed at the time of application. However, during the eligibility period, after the project is constructed and operating for 5 years, the Work First New Jersey partnership will kick in. It will be required during that eligibility period. And examples of Work First New Jersey would be work study programs, internships, sector-based literacy training, skills-based training, and job retention and advancement services. And another question will be describe how the state, county, and municipality will benefit both economically, socially, planning, and other benefits from this project. Next. So a requirement of this program is a letter evidencing support from the governing body of the municipality for this project from either the chief executive or a resolution from the governing body. So this is going to have to be obtained really before the application, so you can provide it here. Letters should also acknowledge that the project can obtain a temporary certificate of occupancy within 4 years of the application and is likely to receive permits and plan approvals for the project from the municipality. Also optional, and I'm going to be talking about that, but for bonus points, we're going to talk about scoring, but for bonus points, you can provide more information on how this aligns with the municipality's development goals, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Next, please. Okay, general project information. We want to know where the project is located, and if you answer yes, you provide the lot block, and size of lot is optional. If you answer yes to the primary project location, you'll be prompted to provide information on other lots. So EDA recognizes that a project may span multiple lots and blocks, but we just really want one project per application, one project per application, even though it may span multiple lots. And we want to know which one's going to be your primary location. Next. Okay, the authority is going to use scoring to determine if an application meets a minimum score of 40 out of 100. And to determine priority of an award if the program is oversubscribed, which is not anticipated in the first round. We do not anticipate that. You can find out more about scoring at that link, which is also on the program, the CAFE program website. And just an FYI, you need to check the box, like that circle around that little checkbox. You need to check that in order to be assessed for that criterion, all right? If you miss that, you'll lose out on the score, on those scoring points. So several of the criterion on this page, they're objective. So the authority will be able to use existing information already presented. For instance, criterion 1 and 2. We already have that information. So you just click on that you want to have it assessed and go from there. Next. This is criterion 3, and the applicant can choose to provide additional information for the following criterion. You've already uploaded a letter of support from the cultural arts project from the governing body. That's already been done. Now, you get a boost of points if that letter also aligns with local development goals. You'll get points for that. And also, if you provide additional comments to, if it's a permitted use through either a letter from the zoning official or providing local zoning or redevelopment plan, you'll get additional points on that. Next, please. Okay, this criterion assesses the project's potential to generate employment opportunities for the region and the state. EDA staff will really use the in-plan model for this criteria, plus any information that the applicant provides. So you can provide narratives on that. You can also provide additional documentation such as an economic impact statement on this to provide additional information for us to assess this. Next. This criterion, number 5, evaluates whether the project is located in an area experiencing social or economic distress. So we have a CAFE mapping tool, which is also on the website, but you can click through it in that red circle. And it'll bring you to a GIS map where you can put in your street address and get a report out that you can upload into this for scoring. Next. This criterion assesses the project's plan to create new positions. So you'll have to go through this process, answer questions to have assessment on this particular criterion. Number 7. Next, please. Okay, here you have criterion 7 assesses the diversity of the cultural arts institutions board of directors and whether it's representative of the community. The applicant will have an option to provide this information in the next section of this application. So this is just a check off. In the next part of the application, we'll discuss it a little bit further. And then the last criterion, number 8, is an approach and plan for affordable offerings to the general public. We want to assess how the facility and the programming are accessible to community members and the general public. For instance, plans on strategies for discounted or free admission tickets, more accessible hours, events for educational offerings, and other ideas for that. So that's just evaluating how the how public the facility will be. Next, please. Okay, these two slides are going to be on diversity scoring. You may elect to provide diversity information in your application for CAFE scoring this was the criterion 7 that we just mentioned. If you say yes, you'll proceed to the next. If you say no, you'll go to another section in the application. You move forward. So next, please. So the first item is click on the link to the applicant identity certification questionnaire, which you'll see on the right of the screen. You fill it in and you submit that with the application. We'll need 2 separate questionnaires will be needed to be submitted. You can submit that for board members or managing members, partners, if that applies to your project. You'll need to download and fill in the form and upload again to the application. Next. So there are two items. If an individual does not identify as one of the groups identified in the former form, then you can upload additional information here for EDA to consider. Also, you can provide additional analysis and supplemental documents to describe how the directors are representative of the community where the cultural arts project is located. And there's a link to census data where you can get more information. Next. Okay, so for project approach, we want to find out more about your project. Narrative, upload, goals, target audience, your artistic vision, your partnership, and your challenges. And then we want to know about the scope of work for your project, for your cultural arts project. A narrative and an upload, the approach to be carried out for the construction work, including but not limited to planning, engineering, remedial site work, demolition, site preparation, construction work, any contingency planning, logistics, and major milestones to be considered. There'll also be an upload field for that. Next. And we tell us more about your project. Provide the floor plan and the narrative describing the allocation of uses. Show us what the uses are in each portion of the project, the total of the cultural arts facility and the cultural arts project, and if part of a larger facility, if so, include a site plan. So if it's part of a larger facility, you want to provide more information on that, the elevation views and any presentation materials that's available for us to understand, have a better understanding of the overview of the facility. Next. We're also going to ask if the cultural arts institution rents out or subleases to others, like a coffee shop, for instance, or otherwise reduces its tenancy in the cultural arts project during the eligibility, which is the operating period of 5 years. If yes, you'll be asked to fill in the table on tenants and subleases on use, square footage of lease, and total square footage of the facility, plus any additional information that's needed. And if the cultural arts institution facility it will be ineligible for the CAFE program if they lease, sublease, or otherwise reduce their tenancy during the eligibility period up to the lesser of 15,000 square feet or 40%. That notice will come up if you hit that cap. Next, please. Okay, the next 2 sections are going to be on project costs and project economics. In this section, we're going to be looking for project costs that will be needed to construct the cultural arts project. 3 definitions are included in this section, and they're from the rules for project costs, total project costs, and soft costs. which will help you develop your project costs. You will be asked later on in this section to download a project cost analysis worksheet. There'll be a live link to this table in the application. And before the application opens, you can view the beta version of this table on the application checklist, which is on the program website. So there is live now an application checklist on the program website that you can go to. It has a lot of good information. That table is still in test mode, but you can see at least what we're interested in. Okay, this is important to know. Project costs are considered eligible costs. Okay, so that definition of project costs, those are the eligible costs. And total project costs are all costs incurred to complete the cultural arts project, but they may not be eligible for CAFE tax awards, but are necessary for EDA to review for purposes of evidencing the financing gap and project return calculations for the proposed cultural arts project. So you need to understand the difference between project costs, which are eligible, and total project costs. Next. Okay, so we're still on project costs. The first section here provides the categories for project costs and total project costs, which will be on the spreadsheet. For example, hard construction costs for new construction versus hard construction costs for renovation or rehabilitation work. The next section, the second part, provides more definitions and details for project costs and total project costs, for project costs and total project costs. This is similar to how Aspire, if some of you are familiar with that program, asks for costs, but it has been refined for the CAFE program. Please be advised that CAFE is subject to state prevailing wage requirements, as are many EDA programs, and we'll talk about a little bit further in another portion of the application. Here's an example of further details. So for instance, the first bullet, building acquisition. Only after application, the cost or a portion of the cost of acquiring a building or buildings can be included as a project cost in an amount not exceeding the cost of all other components of the eligible project costs. This means that the building acquisition cost must be less than 50% of eligible project costs. Land acquisition is not an eligible project cost. Land acquisition may be included in total project costs. Let me pick another one for you. I'm not going to read the whole list. Furniture, fixture, and equipment. FF&E, which is FF&E, may be included as a soft cost if useful life is less than 5 years. So this list really is very helpful for putting together your project costs. Next, please. Okay, before you get to the project cost analysis worksheet, we're going to ask for pro rata information. If the project is part of a larger facility with shared structures such as a parking lot or a foundation or improvement, that information will be required in this section. We're going to ask you to describe the construction details of the structure, how it'll be used by the cultural arts project, and provide the pro rata share as a percentage based on the square footage of the larger facility. Explain the methodology and how this pro rata share was determined and how and where it was included in the project cost analysis worksheet. And the next component is the project cost analysis worksheet, which you're going to upload. The total project cost total in this worksheet should match the total project costs or uses for this project. The total project analysis worksheet will also allow you to identify soft costs incurred prior to application. Additionally, the project cost analysis worksheet will calculate the portion of project costs that are soft costs for the purpose of compliance with the relevant caps in the program rules for these costs. And you're going to get a warning if the project costs are less than 5 million, which would make the project not eligible for CAFE and would recommend not continuing with the application. Hopefully, you know, long before then, before you reach that point, because you've invested a lot in the application. Next, please. Okay, capital investment project costs. You're going to provide totals on these amounts: project costs, total soft costs, and total soft costs incurred 12 months prior to application. You can provide any additional documentation there, which would help EDA staff validate the project cost assumptions, including detailed project budgets, invoices for soft costs, previously incurred cost estimates provided by prospective general contractors, and any other available third-party cost estimates. And we ask for total projected number of construction and permanent jobs on this page also. Next. Okay, now this is the project economics portion of the application. You provided us with project costs in the last section. Now we're going to go into project economics. And we want to make sure that the sources of funding should be equal to the total project cost to complete the construction project. So we want to make sure that your sources of funding are equal to the total project costs, so the project can be completed. And we want you to submit a separate entity for each funding source, and you'll be able to make edits to these entries as long as you have not submitted the application. So this is the table that you want to go through. I want to clarify just that equity, it does mention equity here. What's going to be your equity? The cultural arts institution, which is the applicant, is required to have at least 20% equity in the cultural arts project. However, for projects situated in government restricted municipalities, which are Atlantic City, Patterson, and Trenton, the minimum equity requirement is reduced to 10%. So what do we mean? Sources of funding. For each funding source, include the name of the funding source in this table, the funding source type, the description, the funding amount, and documentation supporting the funding source. We will require backup documentation for all funding source, and at time of application, at a minimum, a letter of intent or commitment is required for each funding source. Or you can also include a fundraising plan, and there's a download button too to include a funding plan in the application. Executed financing commitments, including capital raised via fundraising, will be a condition of board approval and will be required within 1 year of board approval. So you have to have the financing commitment within 1 year of board approval. Okay, next, please. And this is any developments, subsidies for the project should be listed here, and the ones that were listed by the co-applicant should be automatically appear in this listing. And it will automatically sum that. Next. And this is financing, lending, information on lending, to include here, upload here. Next. An appraisal is going to be required for all projects. You're going to need to provide an as-is and as-completed appraisal report by a licensed third-party New Jersey appraiser. The appraisal must be dated within 12 months of the application submission date and provide separate amounts for land and building values. And a market study will also be required for all applicants. The study must include the third party's position regarding the marketability and underwriting of the revenue and expense components of the proposed cultural arts project through the duration of the 5-year eligibility period, and it must be dated within 90 days of the application submission. And those are the different components, the different sections of it. Next. This is the operating plan for the 5-year eligibility plan period. So the project has been constructed. Now this is operating, how you're going to operate it. And we want to find out information on that, including the proposed staffing plan and operating pro forma. So we have a project economics instruction that you can open up and look at. It's also on the checklist, application checklist, and it's going to provide information on how to calculate the operating budget, net operating income, net profit and loss, terminal value calculation, and unlevered internal rate of return. Next. Okay, the project construction, this is the last part of the project details that we're gonna delve into. We want to know about if any how to handle the logic for prior construction. This section will ask if work has commenced at the project and a field for description on and then we're going to ask for you to fill in anticipated months after EDA board approval. So after EDA board approval, when do you anticipate getting your site plan approved, your committed financing, construction start, construction end, receiving a TCO, and the capital raised. We're going to also ask for a project schedule and the land use plan. And if available, contact information for the architect, construction manager, and general contractor on the project. And this section will also have information on permits and approvals for the project. So who issued it, if it's pending, if it's projected to, if you're applying for it, just information on the permits and approvals in order to construct the project. Next. Intermission again. But we're almost to the final act here. That was the bulk of it. So now what we're going to just do is talk about certifications on the application. But we've covered the project details and the economics and the scheduling in the last session, last part, and we're just going to continue on, and we're almost done. Next slide, please. Okay, prevailing wage. This section acknowledges the requirements for prevailing wage, contractor registration, and affirmative action requirements for this program. You're going to need to read through it and acknowledge it at the bottom of the form. Next. Applicants are asked to describe how the project will meet at minimum environmental and sustainability standards, including sharing documentation and supporting their description. The green building standards that we're using for this are on the Aspire website. They will be coming to the CAFE website too. We are going to be updating them too to reflect CAFE, the CAFE program. Next. The cannabis questionnaire. New Jersey state law prohibits certain cannabis licensees and certified personnel that use cannabis handlers, employers from receiving or continuing to receive most financial incentive rewards. So you need to answer these questions before proceeding with the application. Next, please. In this section, we'd like more information about the diversity organization. This is not part of scoring for the project. It's just EDA information that's optional. And if you prefer not to answer, just click those buttons. Next. This EDA requires that the legal questionnaire certification of non-involvement in prohibitive activities in Russia or Belarus, acknowledgements of applicant and certification of the applicant are to be completed and signed by one of the following. So you have to look at that list. And if you are an authorized representative, you will be prompted to fill out these pages in the online application. If you are not an authorized representative, you will be prompted to upload certification page, which will require you to download and then upload signed copies of the acknowledgement and certification page. So that's what this section is about. Next, please. Okay, now we're getting to the very end of the application. The application, the applicants can select to pay the applicant fee by credit card, wire, or check. It's $5,000 for projects less than 20 million and $10,000 for projects greater than $20 million. So that's the fee acknowledgement and payment page. Next. This is the electronic signature page. This is that submit button. Don't submit this application unless you're really ready to do so. You'll not be able to edit the application any further once you hit the submit button. So that's the submit button. That's the end of the application. Next, please. And this is what you're going to receive once you submit it, submission confirmation page. So you've completed the application. Next, please. As mentioned at the beginning, the CAFE application is scheduled to open on Monday, April 7th at 10 a.m. The application closing date is Friday, June 6th at 5 p.m. EDA hopes that this presentation will help to prepare you for completing an application. Please only submit an application if you're ready to apply, since the application, as you can see, is rigorous and the application fee is non-refundable. The program website contains additional resources such as the program rules, scoring guidance, application, checklist, and coming soon, FAQs to give you guidance with filling out the application. Since this is currently a competitive program, the CAFE team will not be able to answer project-specific questions once the application window opens on April 7th. And I just want to thank you for your time and attention during this webinar, and good luck.
Thank you, Barbara. We did get a few questions in the Q&A, and we have been working through them to answer them, but there are a few more questions in the Q&A, and I will go through and answer a couple of them, and we'll ask you to answer a few. One question is, what is the anticipated review timeline after applications are submitted? And when will applicants be notified of the status of their application? So I'll answer that one. The anticipated timeline is that it will take several months from time of submission until we are able to review these and present these to our board. I think the very earliest possible time that we would be able to bring these to board would be the fall of this year, so fall 2025. And then applicants would be, notified when we are going to board, because I think at that point there'll be additional fee that we would require. So you will definitely receive a notification of that. We had another question. Is there an anticipated timeline for future rounds? So right now there is some legislation that is been introduced into the Assembly and the Senate that would actually modify the program and convert it from the competitive program that it is considered right now, where you have to have these separate rounds, to more of a rolling application program, so that we would be able to just accept applications as folks are ready. So we don't know whether or not that legislation is going to pass. If it did, that would change how we do the program in the future, and we would likely be doing new rules and modifying the application as part of that process. But if we don't have that legislation, we would anticipate having another round probably by the end of this year. And if we do get the legislation, we still hope to be able to achieve that same goal. Barbara, there's a question. I'm assuming that any taxes we pay around this project will be reimbursed after we have made the expenditures. Is that right?
Any like property taxes?
I I think they mean like any of the eligible project costs. Like how does that, can
Oh,
you talk
sales.
through how that gets reimbursed?
So it would be taxes like sales taxes part? Is it-
I think the question is more around well, I'm not sure if any taxes that we pay around this project would be reimbursed after we've made the expenditures. Maybe they mean the tax credit. So I guess what I would say on that is that you receive the tax credit, which is based on your expenditures, and you don't receive that until after you've completed the actual construction project, and then it's awarded over a 5-year period in equal annual installments. Let's see. So another question is we don't pay taxes. So what tax credits are you talking about? So Barbara, maybe you can work through that a little bit.
Sure, those taxes are for the corporate business tax and the insurance premium tax. So if you're a non-for-profit, you may not be, you probably won't be able to use those taxes, but you may be able to transfer it to another entity. And that's why we're recommending linking up with another entity that could work on monetizing those tax credits for you.
There's a question, and Barbara, you may have to scroll back through your slide deck to get to this one. There's a question about the part of the application that asks for, which is in the very beginning, the consultant contact information.
Okay.
She's indicating that it actually asks for a government affairs registration number. And what if the consultant doesn't have one? So I don't know if you still have that slide available. I'm not
No, I
sure
do have it.
if that's a required field or an optional
It
field.
looks like it's a required field.
Okay. So we'll have to get back to you on that particular question to find out the answer to that.
Well, that's for yes, if it says, yeah, oh, we'd have to get back to on that
We
one.
have to go- Okay. Let's see. There was some questions to talk a little more about lead development entity.
Okay.
So what I would say on that is there is a very specific definition that is in our program rules.
Mhm.
And then in addition to that, we also had some additional information that's available on our checklist that gives a little more clarity on like who it is that we're talking about that would be that lead development entity. It is possible that the applicant is actually the same as the lead development entity, and there's a question on the form that guides you through that specific question. And I think, let me just look at my notes here. We'd say generally a good place to start when identifying the lead development entity is the legal entity that pays the salaries of the development staff that is working on the project. We had a question about why a nonprofit cannot have a co-applicant. Does this only apply for a for-profit applicant? So yeah, we would not expect a nonprofit to require another nonprofit to be a co-applicant because generally the purpose of having the nonprofit co-applicant is so that when you go to sell the tax credits, it's not a taxable income that is coming in. So that structure is not really needed when you have a nonprofit entity. There's a specific definition, by the way, of what a co-applicant is and who can qualify as a co-applicant in our program rules. And then Barbara, if you have a chance to pull up, let's see. We had a question about funding commitments.
Like economics? sources?
Yeah, I think if you can speak a little more to about like what are the different types of sources that we're expecting to see and talking about the fundraising plan.
Okay, the fundraising, sure. Let me
Yeah.
just get to those slides.
And then talking about what funding commitments we require. As far as like, do we need an LOI? Do you need a bridge loan? That kind of information.
Well, it's important that the sources of funding are going to equal the total project cost. So you have to lay it out. So your sources equal your uses. That's an important concept to think about. And also for the funding plan, the funding plan can be just a fundraising plan. It's a source of funding for the cultural arts project. And you're just going to have to provide information on it on the fundraising plan. Recommended sections include project overview, funding goals, what your fundraising amounts, what you're raising, target donors, fundraising strategies and methods, activities and outreach, forecasted timelines and deadlines, budget, marketing, management and evaluation, and metrics. So you have to have that in place. That can be part of your sources. You don't have to have raised it at that point, at the application point, but you will have to do it after board approval within 1 year. So and sources, you're gonna identify what the source is, what your a description, what the funding amount is, and what the documentation for the funding is. Whether it be what is going to be your equity source, what is going to be, maybe it's a bridge loan, maybe it's a loan, what that looks like. And so that's going to ask for that information.
Okay. I'm just scrolling through to see some of the other questions that came in. And we really do want to try to limit the questions to more about the application process because we do have other resources available on our website, whether that's the program rules, the brand new application checklist, and recordings of other webinars to discuss sort of, the nuances of the actual program. But if you do have questions specific to what goes into the application, like this is the webinar for that. How detailed does the construction schedule need to be? Does it need to be does it need to be provided by a contractor, or is high-level timeline appropriate?
That's a hard question to answer, but we have to have an overview of how it's going to flow, how the project's going to flow. The information in that section too of how many months from board approval are you going to do this, start construction, finish construction, what are your milestones, to give us an idea in order to make sure it's realistic. Like if you're going to specify 10 years, that's not going to be realistic for this program because we want it to be 4 years and then 5 years of operation. So
yeah, we do need a certain level of detail. We are not looking to bring projects to our board to be approved that are not ever going to materialize, right? So it's important that you're giving us enough detail that we can go to our board and recommend that, yes, this project looks like it has a good likelihood of a chance to be successful. There's a question about equity. I think I will answer that one. Does it need to come from the organization itself? Yes. I mean, I think essentially the answer is yes. You need to show us that you have skin in the game. So that's what we're looking for. And again, I think Barbara spoke to this earlier, but the value of the property, if you own that property, can be used if value less any mortgages, can be used as half of your equity requirement. And then there's a question, Barbara, is evidence of a purchaser of the credits required? And then also, is a financing structure or securing funding during construction required?
Wait, the first question, so I think it's like a letter of interest, right? Letter of
Yes.
intent.
Yes.
That you have somebody that's interested in it. That's what we need at time of application. But after board approval, we will need, more of a firm letter on that, terms on that. So, and what was the
And
second part?
and same with the second part, which is the financing. So we also need to see like executed financing documents after board approval. So, you can give us letters of intent at time of application, but after board approval, we need to see those executed financing commitments. There's a question about, sorry, it just moved on me, about, bridging the tax credit. Like, is that something that is typically done in these projects?
Yes, because remember, the tax credits, you're not going to get the tax credits till after the construction is completed. So somehow you need to fill that gap with something. So you're not going to get the tax credits till it's operating. Then you'll get the tax credits from EDA. Year one of the operation of the eligibility period. So you're going to kind of need a bridge, the bridge loan to cover that construction cost. I would say in most cases you would, unless you have a huge fundraising plan that covers it. Yeah. Another source, unless you have another source, yes.
Yeah. So how much funding is available for the CAFE program?
$1.2 billion.
And I think when I look at most of these other questions, I feel like they are more about the program or a specific project. Again, we're really looking to answer questions on this webinar about the application. But Barbara, if you want to scroll through, I'll scroll through as well and see if there's anything that's really specific to the application that we can answer here.
I would also say refer to the program website. It's going to have a lot of good information. It has the checklist up there now. It has recordings that you can look at. It has the rules. So it's a very good resource. It has that CAFE mapping tool you can take a look at.
We had a couple questions about floor plans in here, like what's required at time of application as far as design documents and what level of detail is required for the floor plans.
The floor plan and the narrative describing the allocation of uses and their respective square footage within the cultural art project, noting any areas that will be leased or subleased to an entity other than the applicant. So it's describing the allocations of uses and their respective square footage within the cultural arts project. I hope that provides additional, and yeah.
Go ahead, Barbara, continue.
So I think that's where we're asking for the floor plan. We're not asking for engineering drawings or specifications or anything like that. We just want a floor plan of the facility. And if it's part of a larger facility, we want to get information more on that part too. We would like to see more present, like elevation reviews or presentation materials that's part of the larger facility.
We did have a question. Can you resubmit in a future round if you're denied in this round? Absolutely. You can come in future rounds. You can reapply. The caveat is that the application fee is non-refundable. So that means that you would have to pay another application fee if you wanted to reapply.
Will there be an opportunity to refine the cost document after we submit the application, but before the board meets in the fall? So like what you're requesting in the application is what we're looking at. So if you're requesting an award, that's what we're looking at. And if you go to the board with that award, that's what you'll be awarded. That doesn't, it will not change, right?
And I
We
think
might
it's
ask for
also,
clarification documents, but you know, we might ask for clarification documents at the time while we're reviewing it. But if you're requesting a certain amount, that's, you know, that wouldn't change at the time of board.
and I think, you know, to Barbara's point, because this is technically considered a competitive program at the moment, you know, there really isn't a lot of wiggle room between what you submit and what goes to board, right? Because that wouldn't be fair to the other applicants. So yeah, you really need to have a tight application. And if you're not ready, Barbara talked about this earlier, if you're not ready for the first round, that's okay. We are going to have future rounds as well. You know, we have $1.2 billion available. We would be absolutely shocked if we had $1.2 billion go out the door in the first round. So, you know, make sure you take the time to have a complete application. That is, you know, very important that you have a complete, thorough application that answers all the questions and demonstrates that you meet all of the eligibility requirements. We did talk a little bit about project scoring. Again, for this first round, we set a minimum score of 40 out of 100. So, you know, make sure you can at least achieve a 40. It should not be that hard to get to 40, but just, you know, I think the bigger focus is going to be on making sure that you have all the documentation that's required to demonstrate your eligibility for the program.
Oh, well, 40 mean a smaller award versus full score? No, the minimum score is 40.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the amount of your award. Again, this all assumes that we don't get over $1.2 billion in applications in the first round. You know, because of that, we just have a minimum score. If we were to actually get more than that, then we would have to compare one application against the other, but we just do not envision that to be a very likely scenario. And I think a lot of these other questions that I'm seeing in here are not so much about the application, but maybe about a specific project or more about how the program is administered or different questions. But I'll give it one more scroll through to see. Is there a cap on total credits that can be awarded during each year or under the total program? So the cap is the full amount, which is $1.2 billion. So that's how much money we have to work with. We're using the full amount. And some folks asked us to talk a little more about lead development entity. I did, if you go to the answered questions, you will see in one of the answered questions, I actually copied the language directly from the program rules that defines what a lead development entity is. And again, if you go to that application checklist, there's some more guidance on there as well that talks a little bit more about what a lead development entity is. So folks are asking about the fundraising plan. It does need to have a good amount of detail in it. It, you know, needs to make us understand and think that this is actually plausible, that this is achievable. So, you know, we would be expecting to see things in there like, who are your target donors? How much are you expecting to raise? Yeah, it should be a pretty thorough fundraising plan. All right, I'm gonna give it another minute, see, and Barbara, see if you see anything else as well. And folks are asking about modifications. So again, what we bring to our board, you have to think of it this way, you know, what you're applying for is what we're bringing to our board and what presumably our board is going to approve. If the project changes, then that's not what the board approved. So then there's a process for modifications. There's minor modifications and there's what we call major modifications. And we have fees associated with both of those. Minor modifications might be something like the name of a company changes or something like that. I'm trying to think of like a minor mod. Major mods are when you're changing the project, and major mods often need to go back to our board for another approval. So, you know, you really want to have a good tight project when you're coming in so we can avoid those modifications. And then one question was, are the only GRMs Patterson, Trenton, and Atlantic City? So for this program, yes. It's defined right in the legislation. What is a government restricted municipality or GRM? There's very specific language. And when you read that language and you understand it, it basically translates into there's 3 cities that meet the criteria to be designated as a government restricted municipality. And again, those are Patterson, Trenton, and Atlantic City. You may have heard for one of our other programs, our Aspire program, there was new legislation recently, and for that program, in the specific legislation that only applies to the Aspire program, it expanded the definition. So in that program, there are some additional municipalities that are included, but for this program, it is limited to Patterson, Trenton, and Atlantic City. Question about, is the approval a yes or no, or will the award be granted based on an adjusted number? So we can size the award if we find that you don't have a sufficient project financing gap. So that is one way it could change, but generally, you know, if you are able to demonstrate the project financing gap and all of the other eligibility criteria, then you would receive the full award. And I see Barbara Bickert is on.
Hi, Elizabeth, here's a question. When there are multiple people working on the application, can they access the application through separate access logins or just a single login?
I think it's just one login per application, and I'm not really sure how we feel about sharing credentials, so I'm not going to answer that part of the question. I see another question about if applications are going to board in the fall, is there an expected timeline for the reviews and approvals? So the review, it's just, we have a review process within EDA that requires different factors to be looked at, different departments to be involved, whether that's, you know, reviewing and making sure that you're in good standing with our sister agencies, doing a legal review, underwriting reviews, and then of course we talked about project scoring, so there's a scoring aspect to this program as well. So all of that has to be done. So that's really, I think, when you're talking about the review process, that's really the process. So that's internal to us at EDA, and then it would go to board for their decision after all of that is completed. And then once you have your approval, you know, you then have that 1 year to meet the conditions of that approval and then enter into that agreement with EDA. And then from that point, you have 4 years to complete the construction of the project. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't think I see a lot of other questions. One question about can tax credits be used to offset capital gains? So the tax credits here are specific to insurance premium tax, New Jersey, insurance premium tax, and corporate business tax. So those are the taxes against which this tax credit applies. So, you know, when you are, you know, working probably with like a tax credit syndicate or broker, those they will be looking for companies that have significant liabilities and want to manage their tax liabilities in future years, and are using this as a way to do that. So, you know, again, I think, you know, it's going to be probably tough for individuals, especially like, you know, the group we're talking about here, to identify them on your own, although you're certainly welcome to if you can. But I would expect probably most folks will end up working with a tax credit syndicator or broker to identify a buyer for their tax credits. There's a question, do we communicate questions, clarifications during the application review process before it gets to board? So as much as we'd like to not have to have those conversations, we really want to have the applications be complete and final. If there is something in the application that we just need some additional clarification on, somebody may reach out to you to get that additional clarification. But again, because this is a competitive program, the process is different than some of our other programs that you may be more used to, like Aspire. There really is less opportunity to have back and forth, right? Like the application needs to be considered a complete application upon submission. So that's very important. Make sure you have all that information in there. But again, like if there's something that just needs to be clarified, you may hear from us on that. And I think that covers, again, the questions that are specific to the application process. And I hope you guys got your questions answered. We look forward to receiving your applications. And again, as Barbara mentioned, we're excited to announce that we will be opening on April 7th. So be looking for an email from us making that announcement, but this is the first place where we have announced it. So you guys are the first to know. And with that, we want to thank you for your time and wish you the best of luck with the application process. Thank you.